Another day, another news bomb. Anyways, welcome back, true believers and all you spectacular Spidey fans, to another very exciting episode of Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales 101. And if the most recent Game Informer coverage of showcasing Miles punching Rhino directly in the face somehow wasn't enough to get you hyped, then hopefully this massive Daily Bugle news report will get you more excited. Because once again, Insomniac have posted a plethora of Daily Bugle Now articles coming straight from the universe of Marvel's Spider-Man. And on top of that, we also received a very entertaining and in-universe text exchange between none other than Peter Parker and Miles Morales, where in this particular instance, we do receive a very fun back and forth exchange between Peter and Miles, which also showcases that Peter himself is already in Symkaria with Mary Jane and that he is still trying to reassure Miles that he can become his own Spider-Man without Peter needing to be in New York City. Insomniac also did this type of promotional material before the main launch of Spider-Man PS4 as well. So seeing them bring it back for Miles Morales' game, especially considering that we are now less than 1 month away until launch, is just a very intriguing thing to witness unfold. However, even though this exchange between Peter and Miles is fun in its own right, I still heavily believe that the inclusion of the new face model for Peter Parker completely disconnects the immersion of the character for me. Especially when you put the updated version to the original version, it makes no sense whatsoever. Primarily considering the fact that this photo of Peter Parker and Mary Jane was actually taken when they were both in high school. It's even weirder that, if you didn't know any better, this newer version of Peter Parker could pretty much pass off as Mary Jane's younger brother. Now, I would actually be able to believe this iteration of Peter Parker's age if it turned out that the story itself focused around a Peter Parker who's still in high school. But the fact that we're dealing with a Peter Parker who is in his prime as Spider-Man, who recently graduated college and is indeed 23 years old, I still thoroughly believe that the overall aesthetic that John Bubniak brought to the table as Peter Parker's appearance is much more believable than Ben Jordan. And to a similar fashion to Dr. Otto Octavius, who did look the exact same from Spider-Man PS4 onto Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered, seeing Mary Jane as well as the other core cast members look the exact same within the remastered version of Spider-Man PS5, while Peter is apparently the only one who needed a full-on redesign, just sends me a really bad vibe. And I can assure you that I'm not going to get over this change anytime soon. But moving on to the news itself, today's articles do break down more about the overall supporting cast that we can expect within Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales. Considering how great the supporting cast was for Spider-Man PS4, as well as the amazing narratives that were attached for each individual character, I do think it's safe to say that we're in for an absolute treat in regards to this game's story. And to begin with one of, if not the most prominent figureheads within the overall narrative that Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales will feature is in relation to none other than Miles' mom, Rio Morales. And given the narrative direction that Insomniac is taking Rio within their own universe, it's surely going to be very interesting to see exactly how that relates to Miles as a whole. So as the article states, the season of optimism. New York City hoping for a fresh start with a special city council election this winter. And once again within the universe of Marvel's Spider-Man, this story was written by none other than Ben Urich with photos by Sean Besman. Following the shocking revelation that Mayor Osborn's company Oscorp lost control of Devil's Breath, which ravaged the city last year, various districts are hoping for a positive reset as New York City prepares for a special winter election. Residents of one of those districts, East Harlem, have voiced frustrations for months over rolling power outages that so far have no permanent solutions. Many have also expressed concern for the closing of beloved local shops as mega corporation Roxxon moves in. However, they're beginning to see hope in a candidate who understands their worries, none other than Rio Morales, local science teacher and wife of Devil's Breath crisis hero Jefferson Davis. Morales, who opposes Roxxon's secretive new energy new form and its testing site in East Harlem, has already begun to connect with residents through her childhood ties to the neighborhood and shared interest for its future. But she's got strong competition in her opponent, who happens to be a Roxxon advocate. He's also gaining neighborhood trust and support by promising a strong partnership with the company to ensure East Harlem has a bright future. Now, even though we don't necessarily know who exactly Rio's opponent is going to be during this election, it is very interesting to know that they are in fact an advocate for Roxxon Industries, which, based on the narrative that we do know so far, is surely going to make them an easy target for the Underground enemy faction. Given the fact that we already saw the Tinkerer and the Underground crash Rio's campaign during the gameplay demo, it's surely going to be interesting to see exactly who else they end up targeting during the main story. Although one small nitpick that I do have with this article is that it does state that Jefferson Davis actually was a victim of the Devil's Breath crisis, when in reality he was actually a victim victim of the Mr. Negative terrorist attack that did take place during the Osborne rally. So even though I do thoroughly appreciate all the background info that we are receiving about Rio Morales, I do find that one plot point about the article to be a bit strange. But moving on to the main character of the entire game is none other than Miles Morales himself. And based on the character portrayal that we did receive of Miles within Spider-Man PS4, it's surely amazing to see his character evolve within his own game. Because as the article states, NYC's youthful glow. The city's lit up with creativity, thanks to the kids with big ideas. And in classic Daily Bugle fashion, we do have the story written by none other than Betty Brant herself, with photos accompanied by Lance Bannon. NYC has a habit of chumming out bright stars, from actors and artists to business people and tech geniuses. But we're turning the spotlight on the younger stars on the scene, each with their own entrepreneurial enterprises. Teenager Miles Morales may not be a household name, but the talented young producer has used his makeshift bedroom studio to cook up some of the hottest mixtapes in East Harlem. And with a very interesting quote coming directly from Miles himself, he does state, "Music is a huge part of my life. My dad used to make music with my uncle using sounds from the streets. I'm definitely inspired by their old school beats, but I mix them with a 2020 vision." So not only do we receive some great insights on Miles' character taking place 1 year after the events of Spider-Man PS4 and seeing how far he's come since then, but we also received a slight reference within the game to none other than Miles' uncle, Aaron Davis, aka the Prowler. Now again, even though there hasn't been any official teases to the Prowler as of yet within Miles Morales' game as a core villain, I still think that Aaron Davis as a character will actually have a very prominent role within the game, and they're simply saving that for the main story. Given how well fleshed out the relationship was between Peter Parker and Otto Octavius within Spider-Man PS4, I am surely expecting the same thing to occur for either Miles Morales and his mother Rio, or Miles Morales and his uncle Aaron. And moving on from Miles himself, we've also received a closer look at his best friend, none other than Genki Lee. Now Genki as a character within the comics has always had a very close relationship to Miles, both in and out of his Spider-Man life. So seeing that Insomniac seems to be including the same character traits of Genki from the comics within their game universe is just a great thing to be aware of. Because as the article states, Genki Lee hasn't finished high school, but he's already filled a hard drive or two with software developments any big tech company would be jealous of. Technology can do so much for us. I'm in the middle of building a game-changing app that's top secret. Well, actually, I can say that once it's live. It'll be the go-to app whenever you need help. And like we saw at the very beginning of the Spider-Cat gameplay video, I do think it's safe to say that Genki is most likely referring to the Friendly Neighborhood Spider app. Given the small interactions we've already seen between Genki and Miles in the gameplay demo, I do think it's safe to say that their overall friendship is most likely going to be one of the biggest highlights within the entirety of the game's story. To continue with the Daily Bugle rundown, we also get some brief insight to another side character in the game of Haley Cooper, where crazy enough, we actually saw her briefly appear in the Miles Morales gameplay demo as well as the most recent Spider-Cat gameplay. And as for whether or not Haley could potentially turn into Miles' love interest, we'll just have to wait and see. But as the article describes, Haley Cooper is known throughout East Harlem as a street artist. Her work shows that she doesn't let her hearing disability stop her from showing art is worth more than 1,000 words. I'm a visual person, especially with my hearing impairment. Aside from art for art's sake, I want my work to move people and raise awareness about issues or causes that they should know about. So not only does Haley's character sound incredibly interesting in her own right, but I also love the representation that Insomniac is including within this game. This was actually one of the things that I love the most about Marvel's Avengers, so seeing Insomniac try and up their game here for Miles Morales is just a great thing to see. And based on her character bio alone, it sounds like Miles is gonna get along with her just fine. And lastly, as we move on to the final character showcased within these Daily Bugle articles, is actually a character who is rather obscure within the comics. And that character is none other than Danika Hart, who within the comics is actually the girlfriend of Genki Lee. However, given the description that we do have of her right here, I don't think that's going to be the case within Miles Morales' game. Because as the article goes on to describe, Danika has hosted her own podcast for a while, but the fact it's quickly jumping up the charts shows she's gaining momentum as a fresh and fair perspective amongst the other bombastic, one-sided podcasters. Cough cough J. Jonah Jameson. Some people unfairly push one side of the story, like they trash Spider-Man and his partner, but they're heroes. Period. Not sorry about it. I just want to present a realistic point of view so listeners are as informed as they can be when they pick a side. So obviously it looks like Danika herself is a major advocate for both of the Spider-Man within New York City. And considering the fact that she does have her own show, I do think it's safe to say that the Danikast is going to take the place of the J. Jonah Jameson Just the Facts podcast. So during some of the breathing periods within the game's story, I think we will receive some of Danika's insights as to the current events that Miles is experiencing. And receiving that contrast between J. Jonah Jameson's consistent bashing of Spider-Man to now seeing Danika's major passion for both of the heroes as a whole is surely going to be a great difference to witness unfold. Now, I know a lot of people, especially after having looking at her at first glance, are immediately thinking that Danika within this game's universe could in fact be the Tinkerer. The theory itself is also backed up by the recent Game Informer cover story, considering the fact that they did say that this universe's version of the Tinkerer does in fact seem pretty young. And even though I think that is a very highly likely possibility and would also be a great character change-up for Danika as a whole, I think that might just be a bit too on the nose as of right now. But still, if it turns out that the Tinkerer really is Danika, it's surely going to be pretty intriguing to learn about her specific motivations. And I for one just can't wait to see how all these story plot points and character beats are going to be fully incorporated in the final game come launch. But with all that said, everyone, that's the video I have for you today, and please let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. What do you think about this Daily Bugle news breakdown, and which character are you the most intrigued to learn more about once we play the full game for ourselves? Besides Miles Morales himself, I'm actually very curious to learn more about Haley's inclusion in the main narrative, and see exactly how she can connect to both Miles and Spider-Man. And if it turns out that both Miles and Haley end up getting together by the end of the game, that would just be incredibly wholesome. But until the next news update, everyone, thank you all so much for watching. Stay spectacular, Spidey fans. Feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy, and without further ado, peace out.